Hello Internet, my name is Damian Michaels, but you can call me Blue, and welcome back to another episode of Brews. This week, we're continuing our journey to play each legal companion in Historic Brawl. We've played 6 out of 8 of the legal ones, with only 2 left, and this week we're playing Kaheera the Orphangurad. Last week, I talked about how I wasn't feeling Kaheera or Karuga yet, and wanted to hold them off for a week or two to refine them a bit, and I think I'm satisfied with Kaheera at least. Before last week, I was trying to make 4-color elementals work with Omnath Locus of Creation, but it just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I put almost every good elemental in the colors in the deck that I had in my collection, and it kept losing, and there weren't enough landfall synergies to make that sub-theme work with only elementals. I know I can play other creature types, but I wanted to honor the restriction and only play the creature type that I chose, so I guess I made things harder for myself than they needed to be. Regardless, I eventually decided that elementals wasn't doing it for me and pivoted to cats. I unfortunately lost blue by this change, leaving me to play Naya, arguably the color combination I play the least. I considered just playing green-white, but I didn't have enough cards to make the deck work in a way I was happy with, so I kept the red and landed on Jetmir, Nexus of Revels for the commander. I had Ren and Ciri as the commander at one point, but didn't really like it in that spot, so I put it into the 99, but I think Jetmir is just better for what we're trying to do here. That being said, there's not much to talk about. It's cat tribal. We're playing a bunch of bad tribal support to support our bad tribe, all the best cats I have in my collection, plus a few changelings, and a whole lot of removal to help clear the litter box. That's basically it, so let's just get into the games. Game 1, we're on the play against Slimefoot and Squee, and we keep at 7. We start with a tap land and pass the turn. Opponent starts with a mountain into Faithless Looting. They draw 2, discard 2, and pass the turn. We untap and drop a land before casting Arcane Signet and passing. Opponent untaps and plays a forest with nothing else before passing. We untap, draw, and play a forest, followed by Jetmir, and we pass. Opponent untaps and again plays a forest, but this one is followed by Fable of the Mirror Breaker. They make a token and pass. We untap, draw, and play a Rootbound Crag, followed by Mutating Cub Warden. I goofed by putting it over instead of under, but it's whatever. We make our cat tokens and attack for 4 before passing it back. Opponent untaps and draws for turn. Fable triggers and they discard 2 to draw 2. Next, they play a Dragon Skull Summit and cast their commander. They make a Saproling and pass the turn. We untap, draw, and play a Flooded Strand. Next, we play a Johnny Nagadol Pariah. He enters, and we make a 2/1 cat token. Next, we play Swords to Plowshares on their commander so they can't use it to reanimate, and we move to combat. We attack with everything, and they block our Cub Warden with their Saproling. We hit with everything else and move to post-combat. We crack our Flooded Strand to go grab a Sacred Foundry untapped so we can put Kaheera in hand before we pass the turn. Opponent untaps, draws, and their Fable of the Mirror Breaker flips over. Next, they play a tapped Stomping Ground and run out Namada Primeval Warden before passing the turn. We untap and play a Vanquisher's Banner, naming Cat, of course. We move to combat and attack with everything but a Johnny. They block with their Goblin token and Namada to take out our cat, and they take the rest before we pass. Opponent untaps and just plays their commander to make another Saproling and passes. We untap, draw, and play a Command Tower. Next, we run out Kaheera, which draws us a card. We go to combat, and I considered attacking but thought against it. Second main, we cast the Migration Path to find a mountain and forest before passing the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Guardian Project before passing. We untap, draw, and play an Impostor of the Pride. We draw a Lion Sash, and Impostor resolves. We play Sash and draw another card. It resolves, and we cast the Frondland Felidar. This draws us another card, and we can't do anything else, so we pass the turn with no attacks. Opponent untaps and casts a Tribute to the World Tree before passing. Not much going on over there. We untap, draw, and play Cutzil Malamet Exemplar. We cast it, which draws out a removal spell from our opponent on our Cub Warden. We activate it in response to tap down their commander. It gets exiled and they make a token, but we put Jetmir in the command zone. Cutzil finally resolves and Banner draws us a land, so we play Arid Mesa and crack it to go grab a Plains so we can recast Jetmir. We have 9 creatures, so we attack with everything, and it all gets in with Vigilance, Trample, and Double Strike thanks to Jetmir. To say the least, this is definitely lethal, and our opponent scoops it up. Game 2. We're on the play against Gitfrog, and we keep at 7. We start with an untapped Sacred Foundry and a Shadow Spear before passing. Opponent plays a tap land and passes the turn. We untap and play a Rootbound Crag, followed by Rally the Ranks, naming Cat, and passing. Opponent untaps and plays a Swamp, followed by Arcane Signet before passing. We untap and play a Forest, followed by Radiant Destiny, again naming Cat before we pass the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Swamp and a Rotting Regisar before passing the turn. We untap and play a Clifftop Retreat and a Migration Path to go grab a Mountain and Forest before we pass. Opponent untaps and discards a Forest to the Dino. They move to main phase and cast the Gitfrog. They saddle with the Dino and attack for 6. They connect, letting them sack their Dino to draw 7 and put up to 7 lands on the board. They only have a Forest and a Swamp before moving to discard. They get rid of some cards and pass the turn. We untap and play a Plains, which activates the City's Blessing. Next, we play Jetmir and cast Declaration in Stone on Gitfrog to get it off the board. They make a clue token and we pass the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Swamp, followed up by Liliana of the Veil. They take it down to get rid of Jetmir. Forsaken Miner triggers, so they get it back, and we put Jetmir back to the command zone. They crack their clue to draw a card and play a Bloodsprout Talisman tapped before passing. We untap and play a Forest so we can replay Jetmir. It resolves and we pass the turn, holding up Fateful Absence. Opponent untaps and plays a Phyrexia Nissa. They take it down and make an 8/8 token. They take up Lily and we respond by killing Nissa. It dies and they investigate. We discard nothing and they discard something. They activate their Bloodsprout before going to combat and attacking for 2. We take it and they pass. This is obviously a trap with this attack and I'm not falling for it. We untap and draw a land. We equip our Shadow Spear to Jetmir, and we put Kaheera in hand. We cast Kaheera before we move to combat. We swing at Liliana to try to get rid of it. They block with their 8/8, trading it with Jetmir, but we knock Lily down to 1 and gain a bunch of life. Post-combat, we play a Wooded Foothills before we move to end. Opponent cracks a clue token and lets us pass the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. We respond by cracking our fetch to grab a Surveil land. We keep Realmwalker on top and let Vorinclex resolve. They take up Liliana to discard a card, then cast Analyze the Pollen with the evidence collected. They go to grab a Fanatic of Ronas and cast it before they move to combat. They attack for 6 with Vorinclex, and we take it before they pass the turn. We untap and equip Shadow Spear to Kaheera. We move to combat and attack Lily for 6 with Trample. They take it, and we move to second main. We play the Realmwalker we knew about, naming Cat. We flip a Scalding Tarn on top of the deck, and we pass the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Forest, followed by Assemble the Team to go grab a card from the top third of their deck. They grab a card before they cast Gitfrog again. They follow this up with a Pugnacious Hammerskull and a Pillage the Bog. Pillage grabs them a card and they move to combat. They attack with Vorinclex and pass the turn. We untap and draw the Tarn we knew was there. We play and crack it to shuffle away the Marsh Flats. We grab a Commercial District and put a Johnny in the bin since we can't cast it from the top anyway. That finds us an Ocelot Pride that we can cast. We can't cast a Zika's Chariot, however, but we can replay Jetmir again and move to combat. We attack with Kaheera for 6, and they surprisingly block with Gitrog to trade. We move to end step and make some tokens with Ocelot Pride, then they activate their Bloodsprout Talisman before they let us end the turn. They untap and start with Gitrog again. They follow this up with Dark Ritual before casting an Inscription of Ruin for all 3 modes. They kill our Ocelot Pride and return their Lotus Cobra to play before they go to combat. They attack with Vorinclex, Gitrog, and the Hammer Skull. We use our tokens to get Vorinclex off the board, and Jetmir trades with Gitrog. But the Hammer Skull gets through with the stun counters before they pass the turn. We untap and draw the Chariot we knew about. We've got a Plains on top, so we recast Jetmir and pass the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Forest, triggering Lotus Cobra to make a green mana. They follow up with a Flare of Cultivation to go grab some lands. They grab a Forest and a Swamp, putting the latter in play. Then they recast Gitrog again and actually attack with it this time. They hit and hit us down for 6 before they pass the turn. We untap and draw the Plains, then play it and equip our Shadow Spear onto Jetmir. Then we run out Azika's Chariot to make some more tokens. We move to combat and attack with Jetmir. They block with Lotus Cobra, even though it has Trample, so they take a bunch of damage anyway, and we pass the turn. Opponent untaps and plays a Topiary Stomper to go grab a land. They play the Swamp we knew that they had and pass the turn. We untap and draw a Sakazin. We play the Lion Sash from the top and use it to crew our Azika's Chariot. Next, we channel our Sakazin to make some tokens before we move to combat. We attack with everything, causing Chariot to trigger. We make another cat token, putting us to 9 creatures. Everything has Vigilance, Trample, and Double Strike now. Opponent sees the writing on the wall, so they don't even bother blocking and take very lethal damage. Jetmir really put up quite the performance for this video. We managed to get into full power for both games and get in for the Mega Murder. First guy scooped it up before we could get our hit in, but we for sure got to see just how much damage we can manage in that second game. And that wasn't even including regular combat damage, that was just first strike damage. That being said, Jetmir also struggled a bit for me. I didn't lose that much, but it was enough. Most games ended all the same, control decks blowing up the board over and over, or a faster aggro deck ending things before we can. But there are 2 games that I felt were interesting enough to single out. Firstly, we got absolutely bodied by bears. I tried to stay in this, but once Norn came down, I had enough and dipped like guacamole. And secondly, I played against a pretty cool Ovika list. I was pretty annoyed in the moment losing to this, but in hindsight, I realized this was almost certainly Magical Christmas Land for them, so this was pretty awesome to get on camera, even if it was for the opponent. Anyway, that's all for today. You can find a full deck list in the description below. While you're down there, feel free to subscribe so you can become a member of the Blue Crew today. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and tap that like button too. It adds 1 mana to the YouTube algorithm and I'd greatly appreciate it. If you want to see some more of my content, then you can click here to watch last week's video where we played a different cat nightmare with Luris and Amalia, or you can check out this playlist to watch some of my shorts.